Hello. So a bunch of people have been asking about the Battle Pass light cones, and I figured since people are starting to get to around level 30, if you've been playing a lot of this game, we should talk about them. So in this video, we're going to kind of go over all the Battle Pass light cones and which ones are sort of the best and why they are the best. Now, with that said, they're all really good, and you're probably going to end up getting them all anyways if you keep getting the Battle Pass. So with that said, let's get into the menu because it's really cold out here. So let's start by talking about the Abundance light cone. Now, the Abundance Battle Pass light cone is called Warmth Shortens Cold Nights, and it increases your max HP by 16%. When you use a basic attack or skill, it restores all of your allies' HP by an amount equal to 2% of the respective HP. Now, a lot of people are going to see this and think immediately that this is a broken light cone. The reason being that it heals your entire team by a portion of their max HP whenever you use your basic attack or skill, and that's going to be on top of any healing that your Abundance character puts out. On top of that, it has HP, so any HP scaling healers get benefit out of this. And I'm not going to say there's the problem with this light cone because honestly, there's not. But in comparison to a lot of the other light cones that you have at your disposal as a free-to-play player, this light cone does not bring as much value as some of the other options. If we take a look at all of the Abundance light cones, we have Quid Pro Quo, which is a free-to-play one, and then Cornucopia, Find Fruit, and Multiplication. These are all light cones that you're going to be able to get on your own without spending a dime. On top of that, though, we have some gacha light cone options, and we also have the 5-star light cone right here. And basically, a lot of these light cones, including the 5-star one and some of the other 4-star ones, are going to increase your outgoing healing, or they're going to increase your HP. For example, Perfect Timing increases outgoing healing by effect resistance. Shared Feeling increases outgoing healing as well. Cornucopia also outgoing healing. Quid Pro Quo gives you energy, which is pretty good, and that makes it different from the Battle Pass light cone. But ultimately, what I'm arguing with this Battle Pass light cone is that though it gives you HP and helps increase your overall healing output, the only thing that really differentiates this light cone from the other ones is its effect that gives you healing on your basic attack and skill, and the base HP of the light cone, which ends up being 48 in comparison to the 43 Quid Pro Quo or the 43 of Cornucopia. So with that said, this is not a bad light cone, it's actually very good, but the difference in value from this Battle Pass light cone and some of the free-to-play accessible ones isn't that much to where you absolutely need it. Next up is the Nihility light cone, We Will Meet Again. And this character looks so sick, I hope he's playable soon. After the wearer uses a basic attack or skill, deals additional damage equal to 48% of the wearer's attack to a random enemy that has been attacked. Basically, this Nihility light cone is just extra damage on top of the damage that you were already doing with some pretty decent base stats. So this Nihility light cone, the Battle Pass one, We Will Meet Again, has higher base attack for a 4-star light cone compared to our free-to-play light cone for Mana, which has a lower base attack but higher HP. This means for your Nihility characters that deal a lot of damage, this light cone will help out with that a lot. But Nihility is also about debuffing, and there's lots of light cones that can help you do that a little bit better. For example, Eyes of Prey is a gacha light cone that gives you an effect hit rate increase and damage over time damage increase. And even though it has lower base stats, this can be a better light cone for a lot of Nihility characters that would actually look to use damage over time and need that effect hit rate than something like We Will Meet Again. You also have Resolution Shines of Pearls of Sweat, which I've already talked about in a previous video, but basically this one gives you a chance to lower enemy defense. And with Nihility being focused primarily on damage over time and debuffs, it doesn't quite make sense to me to just have a light cone that deals extra damage. Now, that's not calling this light cone bad. In fact, if you have a Nihility character that deals a lot of damage or is meant to deal a lot of damage, this makes that damage even better. Basically, We Will Meet Again is a light cone that you will pull for if you're playing a damage dealing Nihility character, but keep in mind that a lot of Nihility characters are meant to be supports that debuff enemies rather than raw damage dealers. So this light cone won't be universally good on every Nihility character, as opposed to some of the other light cones that you may have access to. Once again, this light cone isn't bad, but a lot of Nihility characters apply debuffs like Welt and Perla, and Sampo, while he can take really big advantage of it, I wouldn't say it's a light cone worth pulling only for Sampo unless he's literally your fave. Next up is This Is Me, and this, in my opinion, is one of the better light cone options that you actually have. This Is Me is a preservation light cone, and this is going to be something that you can put on your March 7th, your Japard, or your Fire Trailblazer. The preservation characters that we have all scale on defense right now, including Fire MC, so having a light cone that can give you extra defense that also has really high base defense can be really helpful for a character like March 7th, Japard, or for Fire Trailblazer. On top of that, it increases the damage that you deal with your ultimate by a portion of your defense, which can make Fire Trailblazer and March 7th deal a little bit more damage, and that can be pretty helpful. I would say the reason to pull for this cone is if you just don't have any good preservation cones and you want to make sure that March 7th or Fire Trailblazer has a really good option. But keep in mind there also are other good preservation options as well. If you're free to play, Amber can be solid for the raw defense it gives you, even though it does have a lower base defense stat. We Are Wildfire is a decent preservation cone that will help reduce the damage that your allies take for the first 5 turns of battle. Obviously, if you get the 5-star Japard light cone that increases your defense by a whole bunch, this is also going to be better. And Day 1 of My New Life, even though it does have lower base stats, also increases your defense by 16% and also gives your entire team damage resistance. So if you do have Day 1 of My New Life or Moment of Victory, you could make the argument that This Is Me is a lot less valuable, but if you don't have either of those ones and you do need a preservation light cone, This Is Me can be a really good option. Return to Darkness is the Hunt Battle Pass light cone, and this one actually is pretty interesting. It has pretty high base stats, as most of these other light cones do, and increases the crit rate of the wearer by 12% at S1, 24% at S5, which is achievable if you play this game for a really long time and continue to get the Battle Pass. After a crit, there is a fixed chance to dispel one buff on the target enemy. This effect can only trigger one time per attack. Basically, this means if you have a character like Zilla who does a lot of hits in an attack, you have multiple chances for this to work during that one attack window. If you build a lot of crit on your characters or you are critting consistently, which for Hunt is pretty normal, you have a really high chance of removing a buff from an enemy. Now, this honestly isn't the most useful cone at the moment, but this could be incredibly useful later down the line. The reason being that there's enemies in a future zone that will revive themselves after you take out all of their HP. However, if you remove that buff that they have that allows them to revive, you can kill them permanently without having to worry about that the first time, which means that this is indirectly a Zilla buff against those types of enemies. There are many powerful Hunt light cones that you have access to. Subscribe for More is good, Swordplay is pretty good as well, Only Silence Remains is pretty solid. All of these cones have decent stats. These three cones have basically the same attack stat, but they all provide some sort of crit or damage bonus, and all three of them are pretty good. River Flows in Spring is going to be the free-to-play craftable one, and it also gives you a little bit of damage bonus with similar stats to the other gacha light cones. In the Night, if you happen to have it, in my opinion, is the best Hunt light cone right now. Sleep Like the Dead is also a good option, and Cruising in the Stellar Sea are a good option. None of these light cones are necessarily bad, and the fact that you have access to Cruising in the Stellar Sea and can max it out to get all this bonus crit rate, to me means that it's not that important for you to pull the Hunt light cone here, Return to Darkness, unless you really have just gotten super unlucky and not pulled any other Hunt light cones and only have Cruising in the Stellar Sea. This light cone effectively lets you replace a character that would normally remove enemy buffs with a light cone on a Hunt character, and that's pretty dang good. If you're just looking for something that has good stats, you can actually get that without this light cone. You can use Cruising in the Stellar Sea, and that'll be pretty good. But I do want to point out that in endgame, removing buffs on enemies can be super helpful, and so I do think that once everyone gets to the endgame zones and the endgame content, this light cone will be significantly more valuable. Next up is Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds, and this one is one that you may have already heard of or thought about getting. If you've ever used Widsith in Genshin Impact, it's kind of like that. At the start of battle and whenever the wearer's turn begins, one of the following effects is applied randomly. It either increases all of your allies' attack by 10%, crit damage by 12%, or energy regen by 6%. This is at S1. At S5, it's 20, 24, and 12%, and these are pretty beefy numbers. The thing is, this is pretty unconditional. You're going to get a random one of these effects every single turn, and it's a really big buff just for having something equipped. You can't stack this effect, that would be way too strong to be honest, but this Harmony light cone is insanely good value and can add a lot of damage just simply for existing. Now with that said, I do want to sort of be realistic about this. I think a lot of people look at this light cone and then they instantly think that this is the first one that they should grab and it is the best one. The Harmony characters that you would use it on would be someone like Bronya, Astar, or Tingyun, and all of these characters could take advantage of it. But all of these characters could also take advantage of these other light cones that are in the Harmony category. Two light cones to me stick out in particular. Those are going to be Dance, 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 and But the Battle Isn't Over. But the Battle Isn't Over is one that if you have it, you should absolutely use, but not everyone's going to have it. Increases the wearer's energy regenerate by 10%, and regenerate one skill point when the wearer uses their ultimate on an ally. This effect can be triggered once every 2 uses of the ultimate. There's a whole lot of words, but basically it gives you skill points back and it increases your energy regen, and it also makes it so the next ally deals more damage. This light cone is insanely good, and it's definitely going to add more value to your team than something like Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds. The reason being that skill point management is really important in this game, and getting a skill point back is really good, but also if you know how to control your turns and who you're giving that damage buff to, this is going to end up being more damage. The other one I wanted to look at is Dance, 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 which I talked about in my light cone video as well, and when the wearer uses their ultimate, all allies' actions are forwarded by 16%. At S5, this is 24. The value of this is insane, and I think not enough people understand how good this light cone is just for existing. Harmony characters are characters that you want to use your ult on because they're going to buff you. You have Asta's ult, you have Bronya's ult, and you have Tingyun's ult, and all of them you're going to want to use as soon as you can, or under the right conditions, which you should be hopefully setting up as often as possible. Advancing all allies' actions forward is different from speed. It's actually more like cutting the line than speeding up how fast you get to the front of the line. And by cutting the line, you are effectively giving yourself more turns and opportunities to attack, while also also giving yourself more opportunities to generate skill points depending on the team that you're running. This is a gacha light cone and it's a 4-star, and then this is also a gacha light cone that is a 5-star. It's gonna be a lot harder to get, but the battle isn't over. But if you have access to Dance Dance Dance, Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds could be debatably less efficient for you than Dance Dance Dance, but it could also debatably be better for you. It really just depends on the team composition that you're running. Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds is an amazing light cone that provides a ton of value and is just overall something that you absolutely should go for in the long run for your account. However, I can't justifiably say that you absolutely need it if you do have access to something like Dance 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 or but the battle isn't over. So with that said, this is an insanely good value light cone, but there's also really good value Harmony light cones already that you might have, and if you do, you could focus on a different light cone for now and come back to this later. Next up is Nowhere to Run. This one's pretty simple. Increase your attack and then restore HP based on a portion of your attack whenever you defeat an enemy. This one I think is actually going to be overrated by a lot of people. Now it will be pretty straightforward on this. The attack stat is good for a 4-star. It's on the higher end, and because of this attack buff, this does end up being just a pretty solid stat stick overall. But I think that people are going to look at this HP restoration thing and they're going to think it's an amazingly broken passive. At S5 it does become a lot better, but it's worth noting that restoring a portion of your HP on a destruction character, while it's nice and all, you could also just either run a shielder or a healer, and you're not always going to be able to defeat an enemy. There's going to be times where there's bosses that summon adds once and never again. There's going to be times where bosses summon adds every few turns, but you're still going to have to wait for those turns to come back, and it's not a reliable enough source of healing for you to not run a healer or a shielder, which as a result means that while this is going to be a lot comfier for you, it's not going to be so game-changing that you absolutely need it. Your destruction characters are Hook, Arlen, and Clara, and while Clara can take a lot of advantage of this, Arlen does want his HP to be below a certain threshold to be able to max out his damage, and Hook is just, Hook is Hook. As for other light cones, I think one of the biggest problems you're going to run into with Nowhere to Run is that some other light cones provide a lot of value and kind of make Nowhere to Run fall off a little bit. A secret value is a good one. It has lower base attack, but it increases your damage done unconditionally, 20% damage dealt by default, and then you also deal 20% more damage to enemies that have higher HP than you. If you max this out, you can get a total of 80% damage bonus at S5 if you manage to get it, and that is a lot of damage bonus. That's going to scale a lot better than attack for you. On the Fall of an Aeon is also very good. You're going to be able to max this one out, and it's going to be able to increase your attack by a very significant amount, and also increase your damage bonus based on when you inflict weakness break, as opposed to the light cone that wants you to defeat an enemy to proc its effect. So basically what I'm saying is Nowhere to Run is a solid light cone. However, if you have a secret Val, something irreplaceable, or on the Fall of an Aeon, you don't necessarily need to get Nowhere to Run. Nowhere to Run is something that you should get if you just haven't gotten lucky enough to get some of the gacha 4-stars, or you haven't farmed up this one in Simulated Universe. And lastly, we have Today is Another Peaceful Day. This is one of my favorite arts. It's really cute with the looming Fushua and then the however you say her name. This light cone is an Erudition light cone with 24 base attack, which is on the higher end for 4-star light cones, which means that you're going to get higher attack at the end of all of this. After entering battle, increase the wearer's damage based on their max energy. Damage increases by 0.2% per point of energy up to 160 energy. At S1, this means that on average you're going anywhere between 20% damage bonus to 32% damage bonus, depending on the cost of your character's ultimate. 20% damage bonus on Erudition light cone is actually really good, and keep in mind this is unconditional damage bonus that applies to your entire kit. This is not damage bonus that activates under a certain condition. This is not damage bonus that only applies to your ultimate. This is damage bonus across the board. So not only do you have high base attack, but you also have 20% damage bonus minimum. And then if you S5 this, you get 40% damage bonus minimum up to 64%. But there's actually one reason I like this light cone more than a lot of the other Battle Pass light cones. But before I tell you that, let's look at some of these characters. You have Himiko, Herda, Serval, and her. Serval is an amazing Erudition character and deals a ton of damage. This is a character that I highly recommend you invest in, even if you're a pay-to-play player, because she deals so much damage. Herda's base stats and multipliers are actually not too great. Himiko got some buffs and she ended up being a pretty solid character, and she is Gamba character, so she can do good damage sometimes and sometimes not. A lot of these characters have really, really high potential to do damage, which I think is why a lot of the Erudition cones are not that good. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Here's Make the World Clamor. This is a free one that you could get for Serval by doing the web event, and as you'll notice, you get energy upon immediately entering the battle. That's nice for something like Simulated Universe, and it increases your ultimate damage by 32%. Now you might think, this is insane. 32% damage bonus is crazy, but it only applies to your ultimate, and Serval is definitely going to be doing a lot of damage from her skill. This basically means that she gets no effect until she uses her ultimate, which means that this damage bonus needs to be high to even be able to try to balance out this light cone's value, and it doesn't actually end up being as good as some people think. Genius's Victory Pose is a gacha light cone, and it increases your attack unconditionally and your crit damage whenever you defeat an enemy. This one could be nice for Erudition because if you're bringing an Erudition character, odds are you are in AoE content, so you're probably going to be knocking out an enemy or two, which means that you will be able to get this crit damage bonus. The Seriousness of Breakfast is going to be your free-to-play light cone, and it increases your damage percent unconditionally. For every defeated enemy, the wearer's attack goes up by 4%, stacking up to 3 times. If you max this one out, you can get 24% damage bonus, and you can also get up to 24% attack under the perfect conditions. But do keep in mind that the attack on this is the lowest for a 4-star. Because this is free, you could get up to 24% damage bonus from this light cone, and it ends up being really good. And you also have something like Data Bank, which is ultimate damage. This is basically Serval's light cone, but you're able to refine it a lot more. And then you have Before Dawn and Night on the Milky Way, which are both really good Erudition cones. And then this one's for follow-up attacks. The main point that I'm making here is that a lot of these Erudition cones, especially if you go back and you look at the Hunt cones, the Destruction cones, the Erudition cones actually don't seem to be as huge for damage bonus as some of the other cone options. Except Today is Another Peaceful Day, which actually provides comparable damage bonuses to a lot of the other options like Destruction. If you remember that Arlen light cone, it gives you 20% unconditionally and another 20% on top if your HP is lower. This can just do that. This can give you a ton of damage bonus with high base attack just for existing, just for being on the field and having energy to use in the first place. You don't even have to have your energy bank full. This is just for having max energy, which means having an ultimate in Honkai Star Rail. Compared to a lot of these other Erudition cones, Today is Another Peaceful Day is an insane value light cone for trying to make your Erudition characters deal more damage. Now, if you have Night on the Milky Way or Before Dawn, you don't necessarily need it, but especially with a gap in damage and stats between these cones and Today is Another Peaceful Day, I believe that this is one of the better options for the Battle Pass. So now that we've gone over every single Battle Pass light cone, let's talk about which ones are the highest value in my opinion. So we've gone over all of these, but the main ones that stick out to me are going to be Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds, and Today is Another Peaceful Day. As I mentioned before, Carve the Moon, Weave the Clouds is an amazing harmony light cone, and even if you do have other great options, this one can still be really good for increasing your allies' attack or their crit damage or their energy regen rate simply for existing. This is a really good cone, even though you can't really perfectly predict what stat it's going to give you. All of these stats are good, and if you superimpose it to max, then these stats become significantly better. But if you don't have any Erudition cones that are 5 stars, I think Today is Another Peaceful Day is an amazing pickup for basically most Erudition characters that you could play. If you don't play Erudition characters that often, then you don't really need it, obviously, but the value that you get from this having high base attack and having insane damage bonus makes it a really solid cone. Personally, between the two of these, I would argue that the Erudition cone and the Harmony cone are the best pickups. That said, it all completely depends on your account, and I don't want you guys to think that I'm basically policing you and telling you what you have to do. This Is Me is honestly a really good pickup if you need a preservation cone. Return to Darkness is definitely going to be a safe cone to pick up in the future when you need to remove buffs from enemies, and if you're playing Zila in the new zone, it can take a lot of hassle off of you once you get her fully built and she's able to one-shot those enemies that revive themselves. We Will Meet Again, I believe, will be a lot more worth it when we get more Nihility characters that deal really solid damage and have high attack. Nowhere to Run is in a weird spot because it can be very good, but the problem is that it doesn't necessarily take away your need to run a shielder or a healer, in which case that healing passive almost feels like it doesn't matter, but it is more comfortable, and the base attack of it's pretty high, and the attack bonus you get from it's pretty high, so you can make the argument that if you don't have a good destruction cone, you could use this one as well. It depends on what you need for your account and what characters you want to build, but ultimately, I do believe there are winners in terms of value. That's going to be the Erudition cone because the other Erudition 4-star cones aren't as good, and the Harmony cone because it's insane. Look at it's so nuts. Remember, this is all my personal opinion, and if you have an account that needs a different kind of cone, go for it. If you're getting the Battle Pass over and over, eventually you're going to collect these cones anyways, and I think it could be good to pick up every one if you are going to continue to play Star Rail and you are going to continue to get the Battle Pass, so keep that in mind, you guys. But with that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope it helped you make some decisions about the cones and their value. And if you've enjoyed, make sure to subscribe. I have some more videos coming out, including a March 7th guide very soon. And until then, I'll catch you guys next time.